The lunch rush at Willow Creek Café was loud enough to drown out a heartbeat, yet somehow the silence inside Claire Morgan felt louder. She stood near the entrance, clutching her worn leather purse, shifting her weight from one foot to the other as she scanned the room for an empty table. Her eyes darted from corner to corner, but every seat was taken, every booth crowded, every chair pulled close by people who didn't even glance in her direction. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold January air she had just escaped, but from the weight of her mourning. A mourning that had already left her feeling invisible, unwelcome, and entirely alone. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, but hunger was only one of the things tightening inside her chest. It was the feeling that life had been pushing her out of every space, shutting every door, and now even this small cafe in Denver, Colorado seemed to be saying there wasn't room for her. Just as she lowered her gaze, ready to step outside and swallow her disappointment, something shifted in the corner of the room. Something small, barely noticeable, but enough to stop her in her tracks. If you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. These stories reach more hearts because of you. Claire saw a man sitting alone at a table near the window, his plate half finished, his posture relaxed but not careless. He looked up at her with a gentle awareness, as though he understood exactly what she was feeling even though they had never met. Without hesitation, he slid his plate to the opposite side of the table, pulled his cup of coffee closer to himself, and motioned toward the empty seat with a calm sincerity that pierced straight through her isolation. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't have to. His eyes said more than his voice ever could. They told her she didn't have to keep standing there. She didn't have to walk away. She didn't have to be alone today. And as she stepped toward him, cautiously at first, she felt something inside her loosen. An old fear, a crushing loneliness, the belief that strangers never cared. His gesture wasn't big, but it was enough to shift the course of her day, maybe even her life. She sat down slowly, almost afraid that the moment wasn't real. The man introduced himself as Jacob Reynolds, a name that matched the steady warmth in his expression. His hair was neatly styled, his jacket simple, his smile soft in a way that didn't feel practiced. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to do anything more than be decent. Claire offered her name in return, her voice faint, and although she tried to sound normal, Jacob noticed the strain in her words. She ordered only a small soup, something cheap, something light, because her savings account had been reducing to numbers that barely meant anything anymore. She avoided talking about her life at first, focusing on safe topics, the weather, how busy the cafe was, how she used to come here when she lived on the other side of the city. But there was something about Jacob's presence that made it difficult to keep pretending she was fine. Claire had moved to Denver 6 months ago for a job that lasted only 3. The company downsized, her position dissolved, and her landlord raised the rent at the worst possible time. She searched endlessly for work, interviews, applications, sleepless nights, but nothing seemed to land. Her savings dwindled, her hopes thinned. She had gone from apartment to spare room to sleeping on a friend's couch, and now even that friend had gently suggested she start looking for something more permanent. Permanent. The word stung. She didn't have anything permanent left. Not stability, not work, not home. Not even her sense of belonging in the world. As she spoke, Jacob didn't interrupt. He didn't judge her, didn't shift uncomfortably like so many people did when others mentioned hardship. He listened as though every detail mattered, as though her story wasn't a burden. And for the first time in months, Claire felt herself breathe normally. Jacob eventually shared that he was a high school history teacher, the kind of person who loved helping people understand past events so they wouldn't feel alone in their present struggles. He told her he had seen people in difficult places before. Students with broken homes, colleagues going through divorces, strangers who carried silent pain. He wasn't someone who saved the world, he said. He was just someone who believed that sometimes all a person needed was a seat at the table and someone willing to see them. His words reached her deeply, especially because she had spent so long being unseen. The cafe's warmth began to settle around Claire like a blanket. The soft lighting, the clinking of dishes, the smell of fresh bread, it all felt different now. Not because the room had changed, but because she no longer felt like she was standing on the outside looking in. Jacob asked if she had eaten dinner the night before. Claire lied at first, saying she had eaten something small, but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet rumble. He didn't tease her, didn't pity her. He simply pushed his still warm plate slightly closer and told her she could have some if she wanted. She blinked in surprise, hesitated, then finally accepted a small bite. The flavors were nothing extraordinary, roasted chicken, seasoned vegetables, but hunger made them taste like comfort. She couldn't remember the last time she'd shared a meal with someone. He asked if she had family nearby. She didn't. He asked if she had anyone helping her. She didn't. He asked what she wanted to do next. She didn't know, but she admitted something she hadn't said aloud in weeks. She didn't want to give up. Jacob nodded, as though that was enough, as though that tiny spark was all anyone needed to start again. As they talked, the cafe slowly emptied. People left in pairs and groups, laughter trailing behind them. But Claire stayed seated across from this man who had offered her a chair without expecting anything in return. As the hours passed, she felt layers of fear peeling away, not instantly, not magically, but gradually, the way ice melts under steady warmth. Jacob eventually asked if she had a place to stay for the night. She froze, embarrassed to admit she didn't. But before she could lie again, Jacob gently said he understood if she didn't want to tell him. He wasn't pressuring her. He only wanted to help in a safe and honest way. He told her he knew the manager of a small community shelter that was clean, well-run, and often had open beds. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Safer than wandering the cold Denver streets after dark. Claire felt a tear slip down her cheek, not because she was ashamed, but because she had forgotten what it felt like for someone to offer something without asking for anything. Jacob called the shelter right from the table. They had one bed left. One. It felt like a lifeline. He offered to walk her there, not to invade her space, but to make sure she arrived safely. She accepted. Outside, the winter wind hit her sharply, but it felt different now. The cold no longer reminded her of loneliness. It reminded her of how warm the cafe had been, how warm Jacob had been. They walked side by side, not talking as much now, both absorbed in the quiet reality of the moment. When they reached the shelter, Jacob paused before saying goodbye. He told her she wasn't a burden, she wasn't a failure, and she wasn't finished. He reminded her that sometimes life broke people not to end them, but to rebuild them stronger. And Claire believed him. She walked inside with a steady breath, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that tomorrow could be different. Hope that maybe she could rebuild her life piece by piece. Hope that kindness still existed in the world. Over the next few weeks, Claire kept pushing forward. She applied for jobs again. She attended workshops the shelter offered. She even returned to the cafe once to thank Jacob for his kindness, but he wasn't there. Instead, the barista handed her a small envelope he had left behind in case she came back. Inside was a handwritten note that simply said, "You mattered that day. You still matter. Keep going." She kept the note in her purse every day afterward. Months later, Claire stood at the front desk of a small marketing firm where she had just been hired as a full-time assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. It was hers. She walked out of the building with the sunlight warming her face, feeling taller, steadier, alive. She thought about Jacob, about the man who moved his plate to make space for her, and she whispered a quiet promise to pass the kindness forward whenever she could. Because one stranger's simple gesture had changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach those who need them most. Please comment below. Kindness matters.